Shearing away your sanity a layer at a time. We are the audio assault of sonic mayhem that your mother warned you about. 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. Coming to you live tonight from the Bolter Brain.
And just like a bolter to the knee, it's about to get damn right uncomfortable in the Underhives. The Cog Boys have let the air exchangers go all out across the lower Vardish districts, and the smog view hab stacks causing record-breaking heat waves. And as shaved runoff ice sails go up, so does the crime. 14 bodies were found in Armageddon Memorial Park, each killed with what authorities are calling a long, single-bladed implement. Looks like the Corridor 54 killer may have to give up their throne to this new spree killer.
Wouldn't it be nice if they just took each other out?
And remember, when the bodies gum up the works, cadaver be gone acid is the plumber was number one choice.
Great product placement. I'm your captain for tonight's voyage, the unhinged purveyor of all things plasma Goblin King, joined by my motley crew of discordant divas. Prepare to be shocked, prepare to be terrified, for you're about to witness the electrifying presence of the one and only Electro-Death Scream Queen, Emmy.
Well, hello and good evening, everyone.
And hold on to that whimsy as you witness the ultimate showdown between hunter and hunted as Chac brings justice to all these lawless museums.
Remember to keep your blades sharp and your plasma charged.
Next time you traverse the treacherous depths of the Underhive, remember the unsung hero who keeps the streets clean and the denizens safe, our own Sultan of Slop, Drew.
Speaking of which, does anyone know how to get Cadaver Begun out of your Nexium class cyber greaves? Because some odd stains.
You know, I feel like Windex is the only thing that's made us this far in the 41st millennium.
Windex and
And I
Symbol
feel
Green
like
are the
that's what
only-
remains. Yeah.
I'm sure LA Totally Awesome still exists too. Like it's got to. That stuff, man, if you need to desiccate all of the water out of your body.
Oh, God. Yes.
Windex is the
In
only
this
thing.
humidity?
That's
Sounds like
fucking- in the
Yeah, wear gloves when you're using a degreaser.
Oh my God, yeah, right? If you guys would like to get access to a video version of the podcast, that is available right now. It's as simple as going to patreon.com/underthehive of madness and signing up at our $3, $6, or $9 tier. At any of those tiers, not deers, tiers, you can get access to a video version of the podcast you're listening to right now. The benefit of that right off the bat is you can see all of us and all of the weird shenanigans we get up to. It's a slightly unedited experience, whereas any of the blunders or misspeaks get left in. The weird pauses for 45 minutes as we wonder how we lost something get edited out, but everything else stays in. And you can also see the images that we're looking at on screen right now. So if any of that stuff interests you, I highly suggest you check out Patreon right now. Let's get into the episode. This is episode
111.
Thank you. Welcome to episode 111 of Under the Hive of Madness, Horus Heresy, War Never Changes, Part 1. Before our little break from Horus Heresy era lore, the first time, did I say, oh, did you guys hear that? That shook the house.
Oh.
The thunder has started.
oh, that's what that was.
Have I said, did I pronounce Heresy right?
Yeah.
You did, yeah.
And so you spaketh Horus's name, and the lightning of the emperor did striketh.
It like happened right as I did it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we took a little bit of break from the Heresy lore for a while, but before that, we covered the opening battles and much of the lead up to the coming of the Ruin Storm, an event that acted as an excellent bookend for the first third of the Heresy. One of the interesting things about the Ruin Storm is it's a lot like the Cicatrix Maledictum now. It kind of split the entire galaxy into little pocket empires during the 31st millennium. It was a little bit more like a micro Age of Strife because there wasn't like a direct split where everything north of the line was the Imperium Nihilist, how we have with the Cicatrix Maledictum, but it created all of these little pocket empires, and we'll be talking about one of them, the Imperium Secundus and the realm of Ultramar, coming up quite soon. As we move into the second third of the Heresy, we want you guys to remember that much of the confusion with overlapping timelines and events is due to the nature of history. Despite how it's often taught and how we want to organize it or categorize it in our heads, history is not a linear thing, even when confined just to our one planet. So it's a huge mess when you're talking about the entire galaxy. Warhammer 40k is also a setting that deals with faster than light technology in the warp drive, a technology that allows for travel that isn't necessarily bound by the rules of relativistic speed. First, to quantify this, while the warp is essentially instant travel, meaning that people on the ships don't age at a different rate than those who aren't on the ships, it isn't actually instant. So when we talk about the warp, when any science fiction universe talks about hyperspace or warp space or any of this stuff, where essentially the people on the ship can travel at faster than light speeds, and then they arrive, they travel away from Earth faster than light, they show up at Bernard's star, and then they jump back into the thing and they come back. And when they come back, everybody on Earth is like, oh, wow, it's like you left 5 minutes ago. That's what we mean by instant travel. We don't mean like actually instant. The reason that that's important to talk about when you deal with relativistic speeds is even if we had faster than light technology right now, from what we understand about physics with relativity, that crew that went to Bernard's star and came back, they would have aged 5 minutes. Everybody else would have aged like 500 or 600 years. And that's a really important element to how the warp works, is that doesn't happen to people that are traveling faster than light.
That's
500 or 600 years doesn't go by in their 5 months of travel.
That's how you get Planet of the
Got
Apes.
it.
If you want a Planet of the Apes, that's how you get a Planet of the Apes.
Exactly.
But they don't 40k and 30k. I don't believe they use actual faster than light ships anymore. They only use
It's all warp travel, but
it's all warp travel.
It works as a faster than light drive.
Yeah,
essentially.
Except it's in a different
You're
universe.
moving through
And
yeah.
One of the weird things, of course, with the warp is you can arrive before you leave. Sometimes by over 100 years.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
You can also blip out of existence for 10,000 years where it's only been a couple of days for you. So the warp isn't consistent. However, generally speaking, it's a method of faster than light travel. It's just not, as Chac pointed out, a relativistic faster than light.
Yeah.
A starship could be in the warp, as an example, for days, weeks, or even months. Second, ships that travel the old-fashioned way and messages that travel the old-fashioned way, as with sublight drives, they do deal with relativistic issues because they are traveling in real space, so they have to deal with relativity. So a message sent by laser light is going to take, a message from Earth to Mars by laser is going to take 30 seconds to bounce back and forth. That's common in the 40k universe. Because of that, there's direct line of sight slowdown in communication.
Mm-hmm.
However, the majority of communication is done by astropaths who, like starships, are capable of using the warp to communicate. This means that their communication is instantaneous. It's that faster than light, instantaneous, whatever you want to call it, method. But you have to think of it like a switchboard. A really good way to look at this is the switchboard that's in all the John Wick movies. One of the hotels or one of the assassins or somebody gives a call, and it goes into that switchboard with all the girls dressed in 50s clothes with tattoos, and they immediately jump into high drive. They immediately go through the bureaucratic process of verifying the caller, making sure that it's actually somebody that can access the switchboard, and only at that point will they release the information to all the other switchboards. And that's exactly what's happening in 40k with the astropaths. So an astropath from their choir in System A is sending a message back to Terra. If they're lucky, there is a clear path between where they are and Terra's astropathic choir, meaning that it's one point of contact. The astropath in, let's just say, Realm of Ultramar wants to contact Terra. They make instantaneous contact between Terra and Ultramar. They send the image, they send the message, nothing happens. There's no corruption, there's nothing, because it's essentially two guys talking to each other. However, that doesn't always happen. And in 40k, it almost never happens. Yeah. If you look at the dating structure of Warhammer 40k, we talked about this really, really early and on the podcast. They
use Tinder for the dating, right?
Hinge.
Plenty
Hinge,
of fish.
Did the Space Marines use Bumble?
Plenty of
no. Tyranids use Bumble.
Tyranids use Bumble.
Yeah.
There's 3 functions to the number. There is the first function, which is how many astropaths the message has gone through. So if it's a primary source astropath, it'll be a 0 or a 1, meaning that it originated with a direct line of contact. If it's a 2, that means that it went through somebody. It went through 2 switchboards before it got to you. 3 switchboards all the way up. 9 is generally assumed to be 9 switchboards. If you want an idea of how this works, play telephone with a group of 9 people. The message will get garbled a little by little before it gets to the end. Because of this, the higher that number is before the day and the year code on the date, the more or less it's going to be trusted. The second set of numbers are the day code, and the galaxy has been split up to have 1,000 days in a year. And then the next 3 numbers are the year. So it's still a 365-day period on an Earth-like planet that's Earth space away from the sun. But because it's now a bureaucratic system, everything is in base 10. So the year has been split into 990, or the year has been split into 990 days, 999 days. So if the code is 08.129.657.m41, it was 9 steps away from Terra. It was on the 129th day of the 1,000-day year. It was on the 679th year of the 41st millennia. That's how it essentially works. But essentially what I'm getting to is that if you've got to bounce around a warp storm or you've got to go through something else, there could be 6 to 7 stations before the message you're trying to communicate even arrives, which means that if an attack is happening on a planet, it might be 10 to 15 months before the War Master, Horus, hears that the attack even started, let alone knows the results. So the battle could have been long over, and the Ultramarines that he had dispatched to that planet might be gone. Further, it's a factor of scale. Even at the end of the Heresy and the Siege of Terra, parts of the Imperium existed that had no idea that Horus was even War Master, let alone that he was a traitor. It's just like some of the outposts that existed at the edge of the Roman Empire that had no idea that the city of Rome and the Senate had fallen decades before. And in some ways, this is one of the reasons that the Roman Empire actually continued for centuries, because there were parts far enough away from the core of the empire that had no idea the empire had fallen. And if you don't have any idea the empire has fallen and you're a governor of an area, you're not going to stop running the empire's rules. You're just going to keep on keeping on. That stuff happened in the Imperium. That stuff happens in the Imperium of Man all the time. We talked about Black Shields in the Horus Heresy and what that meant. They were Space Marines from Loyalist or Traitor divisions that were so far away from their Loyalist or Traitor brothers that they had no idea their brothers had been divided into Loyalists and or Traitors, which is how you ended up with Ultramarines accidentally fighting on the side of Horus, or how you ended up with Iron Warriors fighting on the side of the Loyalists.
Yeah. And my favorite one is still the Silver Skulls.
Yep.
Our entire legion of, well, not legion, our entire chapter of ex Iron Warriors, which are now counted as an Ultramarine successor.
Yeah. And my favorite boy is the Ashen Claws, our Blackguards on the other side. They are Loyalist, or they were Loyalist Raven Guard that are now considered traitors by the Imperium, because the Raven Guard essentially treated them like so much shit that they just left. And they're technically not traitors, they're renegades, but the Imperium has a tendency to see everything as on or off, so they're traitors because Imperium.
Just like the Soul Drinkers. The Soul Drinkers got that. They're out there trying to do good stuff with their cool purple armor and trying to find cool relics and the growing weird extra legs, and all of a sudden the Imperium's got a problem with.
Well, they're all gone now, so it doesn't matter.
And the Carcharodons, and there's a couple.
Yeah, the Carcharodons are out there. They did something really bad, something so bad that they had to go out into the far reaches of space and piddle around and kill everything that tries to enter our galaxy. That's their job.
Right. Well, the Ashen Claws are like in the same boat. The Ashen Claws and the Carcharodons are actually buds because of similar circumstances. The Furious Abyss's doom in 007.m31. While it's hard to pin down exactly when everything happened, the Furious Abyss launched just before the Ishtvan III atrocity. The lore that we're going to introduce, the lore that follows in this episode, overlaps with the Battle of Calth and the immediate aftermath of the Ruin Storm's birth. All right, as our last set of Horus Heresy episodes ended with the Battle of Calth and the Ruined Storm. The Furious Abyss stuff is essentially happening kind of concurrently with a lot of those events, a lot of those periods. So we're not necessarily jumping backward, but it will seem like we're jumping backward.
It's a little meanwhile back at the ranch.
Exactly.
And you really have to tell these things in the series of stories, otherwise it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Even when you jump around a little bit, it's just like you're saying, World War II. You can't get a little bit into the battle for Stalingrad and then go, meanwhile,
yeah, exactly.
in France or whatever, and do that whole thing, or Japan. It doesn't work.
And the other thing is that, as we kind of talked about last night, right before we jumped into all of this stuff, history is not pretty or linear. History is happening at the same time everywhere. And Chac, I think you and I talked about this in one of our last episodes, or actually, I think Chac, Emmy, and I think the three of us talked about this. There's that weird, like, transitionary period where there are people who argue about when the Roman Empire actually ended, and there's people who put the Roman Empire ending because of Napoleon. And like, it blows your mind, but it's a really good argument at the same time. And it's the way that like history is always kind of like changing and evolving.
Well, and also like the communication wasn't instantaneous, and there's places and there's outposts where the news of the ending of the Roman Empire didn't reach. And, when you're assistant to the regional emperor, you sort of just have to like keep going and like, oh yes, the aqueduct looks really good today.
check that off the list.
And
well, come on.
Really, really good, guys. Yeah. Let's go back to the vomitorium for a little bit. And then they're like, oh shit, the empire's over, so it's not...
The people that don't believe it existed.
Yeah.
It's not like they can send like a text. It's not like there's a distribution list, all Roman Empire employees that IT's set up,
There could be, though.
I mean, the same goes for civil wars, right? This is a civil war. Yeah. And they are like even more so than your average like war between two countries, where you start with we are declaring war, so we can say definitively the war started today, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is ugly and messy, and a lot of the times people don't want to admit they're in the war especially when it's a civil war. So
yeah. Well, and that's the whole weird thing. The line in the sand that we definitely draw is that the crusade is over and the heresy has started at Ishtvan 3. However, as we covered in the first little segment of the Horus Heresy there, the Blood Angels, for example, fought an entire war for Horus for the Great Crusade against demons after Ishtvan 3. And that's just a function of they were sent to do this battle, and they're far enough away that none of this stuff is getting communicated effectively or fast enough. And the same thing with the Dark Angels. And I feel like we mentioned it really in brief and in passing, but I just want to bring it back up again. There was a battle where the Dark Angels showed up. They fought against some heretics who they knew were aligned with Horus. They knew that these were, essentially heretic guard that they were fighting with, and they knew that they were aligned with Horus. But the Iron Warriors show up, and the Iron Warriors are just like, Perturabo shows up, not like a splinter of the Iron Warriors. Like Perturabo himself shows up, and the Lion is like, what the fuck, dude? Like, what's going on? And Perturabo's like, dude, I don't know. This is so fucked up. But Perturabo is legitimately going to the drop site massacre. So Perturabo knows, and he just lies because he doesn't have the ability at that moment to take the Dark Angels on in force. He just has to keep moving. And that, like, it's all a mess.
This is exactly like that sketch from I Think You Should Leave, where the guy in the hot dog car in the hot dog suit crashes into the storefront, and he's like, "Whoever did this, just fess up." And he's in the hot dog suit.
Yeah, right.
That's a great skit. Very good bit. I love that one.
Yeah, that's Perturabo. He's just like, yeah, man, just doing everyday stuff.
So weird. I'm just
what are you doing here?
Oh my god, I'm doing it. If you can come up with a way for me to low effort DIY a Peter Turbo cosplay, I will make a TikTok, because that audio of the hot dog skit from I Think You Should Leave as a sound on the app.
At that time, really, they only knew that 3 legions were traitors.
Yeah. Realistically, 4 because of Sons of Horus, but yeah.
Yeah. And so realistically, it wasn't far-fetched for them to be going like, what the hell's going on? And have Perturabo going like, I don't know, as he's going to kill everybody. But that's because that was the whole thing. The whole thing was like, there were only a couple, and they didn't even think that they were full traitor. They didn't necessarily think that the entire legions were traitors.
Well, and in a lot of cases, the entire legions weren't traitor. Right?
Yeah, they weren't.
In the Paramar system, as an example, when the Alpha Legion is launching their attack to take Paramar 5, which is the big Forge world there, the Iron Warriors show up to resupply because they're set. It's this whole contingent of Iron Warriors that are set to protect this one sector of space. They have no idea. They haven't been in contact with their Legion or their Primarch in like 10 years at that point.
Yeah, if you play Horus Heresy on the tabletop, you can play any legion as either
side,
loyalist or traitor.
Yeah.
And because they say in the fluff and all, it's like whole legions didn't turn. The majority of the traitor legions turned, but they always had elements that didn't, and you had elements of the loyalist legions that did turn.
Yeah. And sometimes it was just a complication of orders. You're following whatever orders you're given. And then it's legitimately that meme. Are we the baddies? You could be an Ultramarine chapter
following the orders of Horus,
embedded with the orders of Horus for so long that by the time by the time
it's the Spider-Man meme of all the Spider-Man.
You're pointing at each other.
and we do know that, like, subject to heavy Imperial record editing, that there were a number of like sections of those legions that were like secreted away, had their identities removed, and then slotted into other chapters or new chapters, right?
Primarily the Ultramarines.
Yeah.
Which
is why they came out so large at the end of the Heresy.
Well, and one of the other big things is that there are the 8, not the 8, it's either 8 or 9 Knight Errants that are brought before Malcador the Sigillite, which are the founders of the Grey Knights. And one of the founders of the Grey Knights is Gavriel Loken, who is a Sons of Horus from always in my mind, I always think that he's Terran born, but he's Chthonian. Yeah. So you've got a Space Marine of the Sons of Horus from Horus's home planet, who is one of the founders of the Grey Knights, because he didn't fall, he didn't turn, he stayed loyal to the Emperor.
Wait, Sons of Horus or Luna Wolves? Was it Luna Wolves?
Luna Wolves. It was Luna Wolves. So Loken is one of the guys that when, they all change their armor over to the Sons of Horus, and then the drop site happens, and there is a chunk of the Sons of Horus at that point that essentially deface, they scratch their armor. They specifically like deface the new stuff, and they like use their combat knives to get rid of the Eye of Horus, so the wolf head comes through again. And they specifically on Istvan 3 during the combat declare themselves to be Luna Wolves and immediately turn on the Sons of Horus in the same battles. Cool. And Drew, you had brought this up in our production meeting, and I kind of had meant to talk about it like right now, right as we're jumping into everything. So it's a good place to bring it up, is that, all of the lore that we cover from the perspective of sitting down to play the game, to play the books. We're not covering the lore from the perspective of the average Imperial citizen. The average Imperial citizen doesn't know any of this stuff.
No.
So when we do our radio intros and our radio outros, and, us as radio hosts say negative things about the Imperium or negative things about the Arbites, or kind of play fast and loose and tongue in cheek with the rule of the Imperium, it's because that's the level of experience that the average Underhiver has. The average Underhiver doesn't have connections to Space Marines. The average Underhiver doesn't have even connections really to the Administratum. The Administratum is there. It's a big boogeyman that can mess up your day for sure. But at the end of the day, like, the way that the Imperium deals with Underhives is they kind of just ignore them. They let the trash, so to speak, take care of itself. which creates, you'd think like a zone of like anarchist freedom, but what it really creates is it creates this area of lawlessness. There's just this kind of unlawed area, which is why we have so many gangs and so many cults and so much stuff that happens. And there is a point where that stuff gets too big and the Arbites or the Inquisition or the Administratum Marshals can't ignore it anymore, and they come in to deal with it. But the way that they come in to deal with it is they purge it. They literally murder everybody, or they seal off entire sections and just let the air stop circulating, or they give enough guns to the gang that they want to support so that gang eliminates the other gangs. It's very much, that's kind of,
that's a big one that like happens a lot, is the social engineering, right? Where like,
yes,
you have like inquisitors and other agents of the empire like coming in and essentially altering records in very specific ways, changing like grain outputs and stuff like that. So like, and like oxygen consumption to hide populations and that sort of thing, right? So that people like, and over time you can have an entire planet essentially disappear, just by intercepting communications and all those sorts of things. Like they're very sneaky, very sneaky.
It's worse than that in some ways, because when they're dealing with the Underhive, at least they're like, there's a problem, there's something down there. But most of the people who like work for the Administratum, work in the bureaucracy within these hive cities, they're just cogs.
Yeah, they're just a piece,
and they aren't even given as much attention as being a problem.
Yeah.
It always reminds me, and this is going to date me, but probably one of the most famous commercials of all time was the Apple commercial back from 1984.
Yeah, the 1984 commercial.
And I'm not talking about the part where the girl comes in and throws a sledgehammer through the screen. What I'm talking about is the lead up to that. And the whole thing about everybody's working on a PC and Macintosh is this groundbreaking thing. But you see this room, and there's like the 1984 big screen, which just reminds me of how it would be in the Imperium, with somebody on the screen from the ecclesiarchy giving catechisms or whatever. And you just have row upon row upon row of drones entering data into terminals.
Yeah.
And that's really what the vast majority of, they're either turning a crank on a machine someplace to punch out toaster parts or trigger assemblies for a las rifle or something, or they're sitting in a office with like thousands of other people punching in data. Because remember, when you read like a great shot of this is when it's in the Ravenor books, where they have to infiltrate the Administratum block, and they're in there, and they're like, what they do all day is they are just, remember, there's no AI, there's no computer assist. What they're doing is they're taking reams of paper on one side, they're typing them into a terminal, and that's how they're recording.
Yeah.
Like somebody gives a report, it gets written on a piece of paper, the paper gets physically moved to another place, somebody types it into a terminal, and that's what they do for their entire life. Yeah. It's sort of like the Simpsons cartoon, not Simpsons, Family Guy, where Stewie's in the shoe factory, I think, and he gets taken away, and the girl, it's very racist, so I won't go into it on the podcast, but lady gives birth and the baby's put on the sewing machine immediately. Yeah. That's what the Imperium is like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you've ever seen the movie Brazil, that's what like the Administratum looks like.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Very much so.
And that's why we specifically play with the Underhive, because the Underhive is sort of left to its own devices. It has its own currency. It's got its own rule of law. There's still an economic exchange. There's still manufactorums and hive workers down in the Underhive, because the Underhive has to produce stuff for itself and to produce stuff for the mid-hive, for the upper hive. But at the end of the day, the Underhive is essentially kind of left to its own device. So that's one of the reasons that we play in that environment. But another really big factor of that is the average Imperial citizen fuck the average Imperial citizen. The average guardsman, the average veteran guardsman probably has never seen a Space Marine in their life.
They call them angels.
Yeah. And the idea that the average guardsman would have ever seen a Chaos Space Marine is even slimmer. And to be alive, and then on top of that, and to be alive in order to tell the tale.
Well, there's something like
yes,
50 billion, 500 billion guardsmen, something like that, some huge number, and there are 1 million Space Marines.
Yeah,
the average guardsman, if they ever see, even if they ever saw a Space Marine, it would be like from a distance. It would be that gigantic dot over there. It would not. They are not fighting side by side in the trenches, and if they are, they probably have as much chance to be taken out by their Space Marine they're fighting with than the enemy. Like I didn't notice you. You're in the way.
Unintentional elbow.
That's exactly what happens in one of the Silver Skulls novels. They have to go out with this Inquisitor and go assist guardsmen in this hive world that's fallen to chaos. In this Silver Skulls novel, the guardsmen, they've never seen a Space Marine before. All of a sudden, a drop pod of Silver Skulls comes down. But then there's also Thousand Suns chaos sorcerers that just show up in the middle of the day. And for somebody who's never seen a Space Marine to see Silver Skulls fighting exalted chaos sorcerers of Tzeentch, I think it would just kind of break their brains a little bit.
Well, and it does, because it's not a normal thing. There's an entire subplot in one of the.
And you're telling me that these guys aren't Iron Warriors?
No, they're different, and they have to. They have skulls on pikes.
They're silver, and they're not iron. That's not the same.
They're silver, yeah, and they're loyalists somehow, and Ultramarine.
They just happen to have the mask of Dantioch on their as their symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did that happen?
So it's a story, I believe it's in the Magos, which is the short stories that bridge between the Eisenhorn novels and the Ravener novels, and kind of between the Ravener novels and the Beckwin novels. But they think there's a chaos cult that's specifically sacrificing people because they're finding all these weird deaths. And then it just ends up being guardsmen who've fought on the front lines of Space Marines who have PTSD. And don't understand that the war is over, murdering people.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's
PTSD is the greatest force of chaos of them all.
It's.
God, I'm telling my therapist this Wednesday.
This episode brought to you by BetterHelp.
I don't use that service.
All right. So as the Great Crusade faded into the beginnings of the Horus Heresy, Fabricator General Kalbor Hall began work on the first Abyss-class battleship. Under the arch-traitor Horus Lubrical's orders, these ships were to be on a scale never before seen by humanity. He had lifted restrictions on the Mechanicum against forbidden research to accomplish such work, and as a payment. So not only did he lift the restrictions so they could access the stuff they weren't supposed to look at, but it was also it's twofold. I'm paying you, but you're building me something. Kind of back and forth. And we talked about this, and I want you to bring it up when I'm done with this little section, Chac, but I think there's an Arc Mechanicus thread here that I want to pull on in a minute.
There is, yeah.
The first of these massive vessels was the Word Bearer's Furious Abyss, and it was forged with heavy armor designed to shrug off the concentrated defense laser battery attacks that would come from orbital defenses. Its blunt bullet prow and the way its flanks splayed out to encompass the enormous midsection spoke of strength and precision. 3 massive crenellated decks extended from its sharp prongs as if to form some Stygian trident. Laser batteries gleamed in dull gunmetal down its broadsides, designed to shred even orbital stations. Cannons mounted along its metal hull, while defensive turrets bristled along its dorsal and ventral spines. Primary, midship, and aft torpedo bays sat ready and hungry for coming violence. Spiked antenna towers punched outward from a multitude of subdecks, interspersed with further weapon systems, and the ship's ribbed belly gleamed with oil and was replete with dozens of fighter hangars. Its massive engines hid beneath huge exhaust cowlings that flared over the warming engine's deep glow, whose vents were vast and terrible to comprehend. On its prow, a massive book wreathed in flame served as a figurehead, a book wrought from gold and silver. Logar's chosen words were engraved on its pages in letters that stood meters high. It stood as the greatest and largest imperial vessel that had ever been forged, unique in every way and powerful beyond reckoning. Tailored for the word bearers and the Jovian shipyards, its long-awaited construction had finally come to an end. While the Furious Abyss was the first of its kind, and oftentimes this is confused as making it the only of its kind, there was also the Trisagion, thank you, and the Blessed Lady that were built and would eventually join it. To give you guys an idea, though, an Abyss-class starship was only rivaled in size by the Phalanx itself. And here is where I want to talk about Arc Mechanicum. So Arc Mechanicum are probably bigger. Arcs Mechanicum are bigger than the Phalanx.
They are bigger. I looked at the dimensions. They should be bigger.
However, Arcs Mechanicum are not technically warships, 1. 2, they're not Imperial ships at all. And 3, they actually completely predate this entire time period. They are ships of the dark age of technology and the age of...
As is the Phalanx. And the Phalanx is bigger than... Technically, the Phalanx is only an Imperial ship because it was found.
Right. And the Phalanx is a warship, or at least has become a warship. The Abyss-class ships were so large, and one of the things that I was thinking about, one of the things that Chac and I were talking about was, I think the clue here is Horus unlocked the Vaults of Morvek, and the Vaults of Morvek were on Mars, and they hid a bunch of heretical technology, or stuff that the Emperor thought was heretical and that he didn't want the Mechanicus to have access to. I think in the vaults were probably records of how to build the Arcs Mechanicum, and that's one of the reasons that the Abyss-class ships are as big as they are.
But I do want to point out that while the Arcs Mechanicum were not technically warships, they carried more firepower than like the Furious Abyss did, as far as I can tell. It's just that nobody knew.
Yeah. Well, and they weren't... The Arcs Mechanicum were kind of created to be like living mobile planet. The Arcs Mechanicum are as close to craft worlds as humanity has. But like a craft world is not an Eldari warship. A craft world can go to war because a craft world has a lot of guns, but it's not a warship.
Yeah. And also the Arcs Mechanicum, at least the one that we know of that they've written about. I don't know if there are any of the other books. But
there's 3 that have been mentioned.
Yeah, but the one that features heavily in the Gods of Mars series, which is begins with an S, and I knew it yesterday, and of course I do not know it today. But it houses a fully functioning AI and a fully functioning STC, which might be one and the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and then when the Archmagos discovers this, and it unleashes its full firepower and all, and then it basically, the ship wipes the memory of the fact that it's an AI and has an STC on it. So they still don't know that these ships have that capability.
Is it the Speranza?
Yeah. Yes, Speranza.
Yep. So there's the Omnissiah's Victory, the Speranza, the Iron Revenant, the Cestius Metallicin, the Arc Majesty, the Carusus Majoris, the Pattern Master, the Petant Arc, and the Red Arc.
Yeah, and
there's
these
a couple
all
more.
Lead Mechanicus. Well, at this point, AdMech expeditionary forces.
An Arc Mechanicus is essentially set up to find a planet and be like instant Forge World. If you want to think of an idea, if you've ever played
any world
Command
building
and Conquer, if you remember the Command and Conquer like beginning vessel that makes your base, which I think is called an STC now that I think about it.
It's an MPC. It's
MPC. Okay,
the mobile production something, or MCP, mobile construction platform. I think
mobile command platform, maybe.
Something
like that.
Yeah. But like you're saying, these are from the dark age of technology. They were not built
They weren't built for the Great Crusade.
And yeah, they weren't built by the Imperium. And so this is these were for the Imperium and for the Mechanicum. These are manufacturing marvels. Because nothing like
all 3 of them are made for the word bearers, by the way.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is essentially Horus is kind of like the Libyans in Back to the Future, except where the Libyans give Doc Brown the plutonium, he makes the time machine and instead gives it to the Libyans.
Yeah. It would be Doc Brown making a nuclear DeLorean and giving it to the Libyans. Yeah.
Thanks for the plutonium. Have this cool spaceship that can destroy the entire galaxy. See you later. Well,
and the whole reason all of this happened was Horus and the sons of Horus took out the technocracy, and they got an STC in the technocracy. They got a couple of STCs in the technocracy, and they immediately gave them over to Mars. And then Mars had a giant civil war, and then essentially the traitors won on Mars. But Terra doesn't know that the traitors won because Terra just sees it. The Imperium just sees it at this point as being a Martian civil war. And they're like, whoever wins, we'll have a deal with. We'll figure it out later. And it's all these little dominoes falling. And, Kalbar Hall wins, Kalbar Hall being one of the people who is on the throne of Earth, not the throne of Earth, the Council of Terra at this point. There's a war council that's all the Primarchs and the Emperor himself. And then there's a Council of Terra, which is Malcador the Sigillite, Kalbar Hall, and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Kalbar Hall's a bad guy. And nobody knows yet. So we're kind of in that, that hazy, the heresy has definitely started. The Emperor has not gotten the check yet.
Yeah. The Emperor doesn't know what's happening.
So the ship was crewed by an entire chapter of the 17th Legion, split into 10 companies of 100 Astartes. Unshakably loyal to the word of Logar and resplendent in their new crimson-colored power armor, which had replaced their former gray livery. Prayer parchment, scorched trails of vellum with the litanies of battle, and bloodied pages ripped from sermons of retribution were affixed to their battle plate, openly declaring their allegiance to chaos undivided. By the way, the only army at this point in the entire Warhammer timeline that has what are they called now? Purity seals are the word bearers. So the whole idea, like battle parchment, or I can't remember, the oaths of moment were essentially affixed to armor, but they weren't done with a seal and religious fervor. They were just affixed to. These guys are doing the whole sermon pages, prayers, wax seals, the whole thing that is now all over
because they're the only ones
chapters.
Because they're the only ones that are actually
they're the only religious idiots.
The Emperor's cult.
Yes, they wrote the Davidic Bible of the Emperor, which I can't remember the name of for the life of me at the moment. Of course,
it should be. I just want to point out it should be the Logar Heresy.
It should be. Their commander was Fleet Captain Zadkiel, a fiercely devout Astartes, ordered by Dark Apostle Carforon to assault Macragge, where the word bearers would strike a blow against the hated Imperium of Man. As we covered earlier, after the humiliation with the destruction of Monarchia on Kur about 40 years before the heresy would begin, many word bearers came to loathe the Ultramarines. Unknown to Zandikal, Logar gathered Argel Tal, leader of the Galvorbach, and other word-bearer officers who would become part of the Bakran Jal before him, even while the primary fleet was en route to Calth. The Primarchs sought their counsel on what to do with those among their legion whom he no longer trusted, those whose unchecked rage made them more liability. The word-bearers had been culling loyalists from their ranks throughout the last decades of the Great Crusade. So ever since, essentially, Monarchia and the word-bearers fell, they had been doing minor culls, sending people that were Terran-born, sending people that were super loyal to the Emperor out on super dangerous missions where essentially death was almost guaranteed. They had removed many of the elements, if not all of the elements, of Terran-born warriors from their legion, meaning they didn't need to participate in the purges of Ishtvan III. That was the whole reason that Horus did the attack on Ishtvan III, is he wanted to purge all of the non-loyal members or all of the loyalist members, the people that weren't loyal to him, the people that were loyal to the emperor, out of the big three or the big four, being the World Eaters, the Emperor's Children, the Death Guard, and the Sons of Horus. This ensured that Logar's legion was bound both to him and his vision of humanity transformed through the embrace of chaos. He needed answers for what to do with those warriors of the 17th Legion whose hatred had eclipsed their senses. Tens of thousands of word bearers whose rage was no longer pure. The council decided to martyr these suspected elements of the Legion with the sacred mission to attack Calth and Macragge. The Battle of Calth, which we covered already, fell to First Captain Erebus and the Dark Apostle Carferon. Meanwhile, the Furious Abyss's orders were to be executed by Fleet Captain Zandikil.
I just want to clarify something here because it's a little confusing what's going on with the word bearers. If you don't track all that, there are basically three factions within the word bearers. There were the loyalists who they've been purging,
who are pretty much gone.
They're gone.
No,
yeah, they're not there anymore.
The Emperor anymore.
But they've been sent out on basically suicide missions and all. That left the core that were traitors. And remember, the word bearers were the first to openly align with chaos. They're the first ones that were the openly a chaos legion.
Yeah.
But some of them couldn't be controlled, and they were too, as it says, they were too angry. They had too much zeal, and they wouldn't fall into line with what Logar and Erebus wanted. Those were the ones that were sent to Calth, and they were basically sent to Calth to die.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I can't control these people. We're going to, like I said, they were sent to be martyrs. They were none of the word bearers except Erebus that went to Calth were supposed to walk out of there. They're supposed to do even more than they did, but they really weren't supposed to survive.
The only guys that went that were really supposed, that the strike team, so to speak, were the Gal Vorbak, and the Gal Vorbak are now what we understand as possessed Marines. They were the first possessed Marines, Carferon and Erebus.
Yeah.
And the big takeaway from all of that was that Logar could not trust tens of thousands of his own Marines because they had become a liability. So every time we talk about how big the legions were, and there's just these staggering numbers, realize that in the legion that had been purging out the loyalist elements for 40 years, there were still tens of thousands of Marines that were essentially too close to world eaters to be trusted.
Yeah, they were basically, they were too zealous. He basically had to get rid of the fanatics, and he sent the fanatics to Calth.
This is like when the CEO of these major companies is like, today is a mandatory work from home day. And then all of a sudden, 400 of your colleagues and you are in the same Zoom meeting.
Yep.
And then they just deactivate your password at the same time.
Yeah.
They were basically the suicide bombers of modern terrorism. They're like, they weren't killed not because they were loyal or that, Logar was afraid that they would side with the Emperor.
He was afraid he couldn't
killed
control
them because he's like, I can't control these guys.
And this kind of gets back to who the architect of the early heresy really was, and why the architecture of the early heresy kind of broke down the way it did. Logar understood that you had to do two things to make people loyal to you. The first thing that you needed to do, and this is what he did to Horus, was you need to make your troops have blood on their hands like you have blood on your hands. All the people who claim they're loyal to you, they need loyal blood on their hands, and then you'll know that they're proven to be yours. That was the first big thing. The second big thing is Logar knew never to waste a resource. Logar, by and far, was the least martial. I'm sorry, not martial. Yeah, I guess martial is he was the least physical of the Primarchs, but he was also because he was the least physical of all the Primarchs, he was one of the smartest. It's kind of one of those things where everybody sort of looks at Dorn as being this huge figure of intelligence and poise and consideration and strategy when it comes to the Space Marines, and you should, because that's who Dorn fits.
Yeah.
The opposite side of Doran's coin is Logar. Logar was that for the heretics. He knew not to waste resources, and he knew how to build loyalty into essentially a cult. He understood very directly how to like manipulate people, and there were people that he had manipulated way too much that then kind of start running away with your idea, and you can't let them run away with your idea if you're to maintain control.
Yeah, the Emperor introduced the Primarchs a little bit like this. Like, this is my one son. He is very good at fighting. This is my other son. He is very good at drinking blood. This is my other son. He's good at books, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there's Magnus, who's like, he's magic.
He's very good at books and stuff.
Also mentally ill.
Yeah. So the legions predated the Primarchs, which is really important to remember at all times when we talk about this stuff. Each of the legions was specifically designed to fight war in a very, very structured way. The element that the word bearers did, and the word bearers were originally called the
Book Boys, the Dead Poets Society,
the Tortured Poets Department,
Space Emo.
Well, yeah, they were trained to fight in a certain way, and the Primarchs were supposed to be trained to lead them in a certain way. The wild card, of course, is that the Primarchs got scattered. They grew up on their own with their own experiences, and then they took those experiences and impressed them upon the legions, many of whom were recruited, were new legionnaires that were recruited from their home planets.
Yeah.
So they didn't. So you had that split of Terran-born, very regimented Space Marines, Astartes, that had been raised and trained to fight a certain way under a certain doctrine. And then you had Joe coming in here saying, listen, me and my buddies are going to do things differently, and you're going to do them with us.
Yeah, like, hi, my name is Angron, and these are all my nephews, and they like to party, and we're going to have a good time. All right? Now put your nails in your brain. Let's go punch stuff.
Let's go punch this, right? The word bearers were called the Imperial Heralds originally, and the Imperial Heralds' method of war was propaganda. They were the propagandists. So when the Emperor used them in the Unification Wars, before Logar was a twinkle in his eye, they essentially did exactly what we think of the word bearers doing now. The way, as Chac just said, the way that Logar twisted it was that Logar was raised on the planet of Kolis, and the planet of Kolis had a pantheon of old gods, and the old gods of Kolis are essentially the four main dark powers. So they were worshiping the dark gods before anybody really had put a name to the chaos powers when Logar was essentially brought up. And the person who brought him up was a priest who is Corferon, who's one of the few half Marines. Corferon was way too old to become a full Marine, so most...
Hold on. Half Marine.
He's a quasi-Marine.
So he got some of the implants, but he didn't get the gene seed.
He didn't get all of, he doesn't get all of the implants, and a lot of their body is actually being like mechanically assisted. So Corferon is essentially this super old dude in a Terminator, like relic Terminator armor.
There are a bunch of them.
Fascinating.
And a lot of people gave him chaff about it. People would be like, you're not a true Space Marine. And then he'd like, backhand you across like fucking 4 football fields and you die because he was ridiculously powerful. I don't know why so many people talked shit about Corferon because he killed a lot of people. But and then Erebus was a zealot of Corferon's cult. So what Logar did when he discovered the Emperor and what he did with the Legion was he took the elements of the Imperial Heralds and he mixed it with religion as he understood it. And that's how we got the cult of the Emperor. The problem is when the Emperor bitch slapped them a couple of times, they just said, well, fine, if you're not going to let us worship you, we'll turn to the gods that do let us worship them.
Yeah. We'll go find the true gods.
Yep.
And they did.
When
found
God
them.
gives you lemons, you find a new god.
Exactly. That's right. To bring it back to power thirst.
Power thirst. Yeah. They'd be drinking that stuff.
As the Furious Abyss launched from the Jovian station of Thule, a single drone ship slipped past and docked within the asteroid station's core. Fabricator General Kalbar Hall had also departed, leaving Magos Epsilon to organize the station's cleanup. However, it would be the last vessel, the Furious Abyss, to ever leave the station, as a pre-programmed protocol deep within the drone ship's servitor came alive. A flurry of chemicals merged inside its body and combusted, unleashing a firestorm that tore through the station. The damage eventually detonated its gravity engines, claiming the lives of every adept, servitor, and menial that had been stationed there. The debris field would spread far and wide, but the asteroid was very far away from Jupiter, and it proved to be little trouble to the rest of the Jovian system. While the event didn't escape notice, it kind of just became a notation on a page, and the Imperium would investigate it when it had time. It was just sort of assumed to be an industrial accident. And because of that, because it was assumed to be an industrial accident, and because the Mechanicum claimed the losses of technology and production capability, it helped to hide what the Dark Mechanicum was actually doing. Kalbar Hall's will was done. They had further secured the coming surprise attack against the Imperium by making essentially a giant mess. They made a giant mess to hide what they had been doing. During its maiden voyage, the Furious Abyss encountered an Ultramarines lunar-class cruiser, the Fist of Macragge, which was en route to muster at Calth. Remember, the muster had been ostensibly an action to defend it against the Orcs, which Horus had claimed were about to invade the Viridian system, which is Calth's system. The Fist was on a short detour to the Vagilis spaceport to pick up a Stardust of the Ultramarines Legion when the Furious Abyss struck it undetected. The Imperial vessel raised its alarms too late as the massive trader warship turned its port side to face the Fists of Macragge. Knowing they were all but doomed, the captain of the Ultramarines vessel only had time to make a desperate astropathic warning, which he sent to the Vagilis spaceport.
Vangelis.
You're right. It's Vagilis.
I heard that. It was like,
damn it.
Yeah.
It's Vangelis.
I wasn't going to say anything.
I want to get all up in her
Veganese.
Vagilis spaceport.
Wow, that's not where. Okay.
Damn, girl.
Most guys have a hard time finding it.
That's true.
Yeah. Well,
some believe it doesn't even exist. Yeah.
I did not say the clitoris spaceport. God damn it.
This is grimdark adult content.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to talk about the space hussy, if you know what I mean.
Space hussy. I mean, Emmy is the person who coined the Heresy. So
I sure did coin the Horus Heresy.
And it's been called the Horse Heresy before too, just in case.
In a Seraphon lore video, I did say something about the Slanussi, and everyone in the comments was like, "Excuse me, what?"
You're like, "Bitch, you heard me." That's your only response to that.
Exactly. Space Blazers up at the Slanussi. It was a whole thing. The kids love it. It's how we connect with Generation Z.
I think it's how we connect to Generation everything. But you gotta have a bunch of crude potty humor in it, or it's just, I don't know.
Exactly. Then we might as well just be, the GW how to play videos, and nobody wants to watch that.
You gotta pronounce everything correctly.
Yeah. Nobody wants to watch some stuffy British man talk about, my fist in red.
My fist is red? What? Sorry.
Oh my.
All right. The Vangelis is like, have you ever heard the way, okay, I'm sorry, this is my last tangent. The way that they want us to produce, the way that they want us to pronounce Abaddon. You're not supposed to say
it's Abaddon.
Yeah, you're supposed to say Abaddon. It's supposed to be a bad man. I'm like, I get it. Thank you for making Abaddon the Abad man. We all understand why you want us to say fuck, I can't even do it anymore. We all know how you want us to pronounce it because you're trying to reinforce he's the bad guy, but everybody else has been saying Abaddon for years. So guess what?
It's also not their word. It is a name that goes all the way back to Sanskrit and is a reference to like angels and demons and stuff like that. Like,
like
you don't get to tell us. Like, we know that you just lifted it from like traditional mythology. You don't get to change your minds now.
The 6th god in Guild Wars, the really bad one that shows up in the 3rd expansion, his name is Abaddon.
Oh yeah, it's not a And I mean, his first name is Ezekiel. It's very obviously references to different. I'm sure we're not supposed to say Ezekiel. I'm sure it's like Azazakal or something, because every single time they give their fucking Azazakal, every single time they come out with their pronunciation, and they're all like in their 3-piece business suit. I know it's not. It's a dude in like a polo with like Games Workshop written on it. But they always come across as just like they're being upset professors that we've been butchering the English language forever. And I'm just like, it's
Leviosa, not Leviosa.
I mean, the first time somebody pronounced Rabute Gilliman in front of me from head office, I was like, oh, God, that is how...
Cetacean.
They actually used accents.
The one that kills me is fucking Cetaceans. Why the fuck? Like, I can kind of understand that we're not supposed to say Tyrannid. We're supposed to say Tyrannid. I'm never going to do it, but I understand that since it's the planet of Tyrannus, it makes more sense for it to be the Tyrannids, not the Tyrannids. But I'm not going to change it from Catachan, which is how everyone has pronounced it literally forever, to Cetacean. I don't know why they decided in like 2017 we needed to be corrected as an entire society.
It's probably actually
and I'm never
too close
call
to
the planet Uranus. I'm never going to call it Uranus.
I mean, it is the English. They have Worcestershire sauce, or Worcestershire sauce, excuse me.
Worcestershire. We're correct. We're
Worcestershire, but of course appropriately pronounced Worcestershire.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like,
actually, it should be Worcestershire.
Worcestershire.
Yeah. Because it comes from the Shire of Worcester.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Which is sure.
I'm sure Catachan is a Welsh word, so it's probably supposed to be pronounced like Dave or something. But you know, whatever.
Yeah. Dave.
Well, there's a city in the UK called Loughborough, and it's not spelt like you would expect. I remember, like, I met a British guy traveling once, and he was like, "Hey, all right, you're going to try to pronounce these city names, and then you're going to tell me." And I was like, I don't even know, man. It's lots of G's and H's for no reason.
It's like hearing GPS pronounce all of the Native American names across the United States when you're driving places, and you're just like,
it
excuse
doesn't
me, lady,
understand
what did you just say?
Yeah.
It's Manitowoc, Wisconsin. It's not Manitowoc.
Listen,
it's not
don't understand Spanish either, so
it's the Chihuahua Mountains. Okay, it's not the Chihuahua Mountains. It's the Chihuahua Mountains.
I'm just convinced that every time that GW comes up and says you need to pronounce something this way or something, it's for legal reasons.
It probably,
it's probably like it's too close to a word in a different language. It's too close to an actual place name. It needs to be pronounced this way so that we can maintain our IP on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That chapter house lawsuit just
they could have named it. Yeah, they could have named it Space Vietnam. That wouldn't have pissed anybody off.
Good morning, Space Vietnam.
Vangelis was built into a large moon using hexagonal blisters into which docks, communication centers, and muster halls could be fitted and housed as needed. It had become a bustling spaceport crammed with traders, naval crews, and mech rights. However, a large area was set aside for the Astartes legions, sectors Kappa through Theta, with non-legion personnel rarely visiting them save for the Remembrancer Order. We will be doing an entire episode on the Remembrancers.
Yeah.
Hold your horses. They are important. Just keep in mind, Remembrancers had access to Legion stuff, and they were not Legion personnel. A galactic way station for small bands of Space Marines that had been involved in covert missions would use this as a gathering point. Each Legion had its own muster hall, where returning warriors could rearm and then await pickup by warships or transports that were moving through the area. And so the Ultramarines captain... Lysimachus Cestus. Not siesta.
No siesta.
Lysimachus Cestus and 9 of his battle brothers had been on Vangelis waiting pickup after acting as the honor guard for an imperial dignitary on nearby
Ithilrium.
There we go. Ithilrium. Thank you.
They're all very Latin.
Yeah. It's the Space Marine, the Ultramarine stuff is weird because it's like French Latin. Like it's not French Latin. It's French Latin. It's a weird mixture of like old Roman, but like modern French stuff, which always trips me up.
A little bit of Irish spice in there too. Don't forget.
That's right. You got to toss it in just for fun. This sabbatical had drawn on too long for Cestus and his men, who awaited the Fist of Macragge and the return to Ultramar in their Primarch Reboot Guilliman. They all longed to return to the battlefields of a heathen galaxy, seeking glory in the furthering of the Great Crusade. They knew the War Master Horus was en route to put down a rebellion on Ishtvan III, and Cestus was envious of his Legion brothers, the Death Guard, Emperor's Children, and World Eaters, who were to join alongside the War Master. However, their reunion with the Ultramarines Legion would never come, as an astropathic psychic death scream tore across space as the Fist of Macragge died, slamming into the station's astropaths, and it was feared that Macragge itself was now somehow under assault. Cestus gathered his command, recruiting additional Astartes support he found on Vangelis. The Wolf Guard, Bragnar Strumdreng. Yep, we're going with it.
Bringar Strumdreng.
No, dude, mine was better. And his Space Wolves, and Captain Skrull and his World Eaters. Skrull led 20 World Eaters on the Wrathful, while Brengar had the same number of Space Wolf Bloodclaws, who had grown rowdy and quarrelsome in the confines of the spaceport. So, you got to get those boys out of there. They're getting a little quarrelsome. In fact, it's actually described as, even though the Bloodclaws, the Wolf Bloodclaws, aren't as like directly violent and like killy as the World Eaters are, the fact that there's just like all of these Bloodclaws and all of these World Eaters, Vangelis is like, please, for the love of fuck, get them off our station. Like, the amount of tables in the bar that we have to replace is too damn high. Okay, guys, like, let's.
I don't know. Like at this point, I would have like set up a darts league or something, or like taken them as like a team building activity to one of those like axe throwing bars.
You cannot give those idiots something sharp. No.
Yeah. Either set of those idiots.
Yeah.
With these 50 Astartes warriors and their complementary vessels, they had a makeshift fleet that they could put under his command, and Cestus hoped it would be enough for whatever he found which lay ahead.
Guys, everyone's having a good time. We're just assembling massive fleets, just for good times.
Whatever reason, just don't worry about it.
Something might happen. I need
has
a fleet.
To figure out what happened to the Fist of Macragge. That's why he did it. Because the psychic, so as the psychic stream comes into the astropathic choir, one of the astropaths probably dies, because that happens a lot when these like dire warnings come through, and that's when Vangelis realizes that the Fist of Macragge, which was en route to Vangelis, is gone. It's been destroyed, and that's when Cestus leaps into action, not order. He's an Ultramarine. He's always very ordered.
Super ordered.
Captain Cestus' interdiction fleet departed the Vangelis spaceport in search of any trace of the Fist of Macragge or its killer. As fleet commander of the Ultramarine 7th chapter, Cestus used his credentials to further requisition elements of the nearby Saturnine fleet under the command of Rear Admiral Kaminska. Oh yeah, that would be Russian, Kaminska.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Under his command, this ad hoc fleet now comprised the vessels Boundless, Fearless, Ferocious, Ferox, Fireblade, and Wrathful. Furthermore, the Thousand Suns Waning Moon, commanded by Fleet Captain Hotep, also joined. However, this was a naval vessel of the line with no Thousand Suns Legionnaires currently assigned to it. So the only Space Marine on the Waning Moon is Hotep. No one else is a Space Marine. Everyone else is just essentially Imperial army. Exiting the warp into real space at the supposed site of the destruction of the Fist of Macragge, The fleet found no sign of the Ultramarine's vessel. Only a faint lingering energy trace remained, matching its engine signature. And then Rear Admiral Kaminska's navigator picked up a second tracery plasma signature. This second signature suggested a mysterious starship of enormous size. And with this information, the Imperial fleet soon charged after it. It didn't take long for the Imperial fleet to make visual contact with the ship that they chased. Isolated from any news of the betrayals at Ishtvan and the unfolding conflict that had started on Calth, the idea that the Astartes would turn on Astartes was still anathema to all of these crews. The massive vessel which faced them was obviously new and obviously of Mechanicum design, clearly covered in the iconography of the word-bearers. Still, despite all of the evidence that they had destroyed the Fist of Macragge, Cestus was reluctant to attack the vessel, feeling that there must be some simple mistake or reason to account for their actions. The Imperial fleet drew close enough to hail the furious abyss, the Ultramarine's captain steadfast in his resolve against committing to a fight with other Space Marines over nothing. However, the word-bearer's vessel refused to answer, and Cestus sent the frigate Fearless to make a closer approach. Meanwhile, Captain Hotep offered to follow in the waning moon, his regiment of Proserpine Spire Guard troops standing by to board, believing the word-bearers were still brothers and couldn't have anything to do with the destruction of the Fist of Macragge.
Everything's fine. It must have been an accident, you know?
Yeah.
Just a miscommunication.
Yeah, exactly.
Send a message to the Fist of Macragge, Chief Gunner Assistant Steve. Click, 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 clack. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I instead launched plasma.
I broadsided it.
Yeah. I meant to hit send, but instead I hit enter, and I had that set up as a macro for launch all weapons. I felt like that was a mistake when I did it, but here we are.
I remapped the hotkeys.
Yeah.
This is just a clerical error.
Every once in a while, they say that there are no mistakes. There's only new opportunities.
Right. Make it to build a Fist of Macragge Part 2. Make it better.
Two Fists to Macragge.
At what point did we decide that it was Macragge and not Macragge? It could have been Macragge.
At any point, Games Workshop could come out.
And it could also be like a little bit of that like Gaelic guttural thing. It could be like a Macragge
It probably
thing,
is.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, and come on, that's Scottish to the core. Why that is with a pseudo-Roman a Latin
a pseudo-Roman French name. Yeah. Oh my God.
Who knows, man?
I think it may just be Calth was French inspired. I'm sorry, Drew. You keep trying to say something about Macragge, and we keep cutting you off.
That's because it's none of those things. Games. I just got an email from Jess Goodwin himself, and it said actually it's MC Reggie.
Yeah. That makes sense. MC.
Oh, he's
Reggie.
a nerdcore rapper.
He's a nerdcore rapper. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it is. That's who founded the planet. MC Reggie got there. He was like, "What up? Drop the beat." And the STC, and then that was history. And then they're like, we should name the planet after this guy.
I'm just glad you didn't get like an email that it was a Welsh word and that we were supposed to pronounce it like Ted or something. That would have been embarrassing.
Actually, it's Siobhan.
Siobhan.
Yeah.
The Furious Abyss, meanwhile, maintained its silent vigil until one of its crew identified that a ship of the Loyalists' fleet belonged to Magnus the Red's Legion. Zandikul then opened a secure... I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Zadkiel.
Thank you. Zadkiel opened a secure channel to the waning moon, and the word-bearer demanded to know what this display of force was all about. What is this display of force all about? In return, Hotep demanded to know what the word-bearers knew about the fate of the Fist of Macragge. Fleet Captain Zadkiel feigned ignorance before warning the Thousand Sons commander. Great deeds are unfolding, and lines have been drawn. Which I'm sure was one of those like, that's cryptic as fuck. What does it mean, buddy?
Everything's fine.
Whatever chip.
Sure, that's how we talk to each other all day. God damn it, does anybody ever realize every time the word bearers send you something, you have to spend like fucking 10 hours decrypting this shit? What does this mean, dude?
They just type in webdings. Real ominous.
Zandkill further attempted to persuade Hotep to his cause. Flame and retribution were coming, and those on the wrong side of the line would burn to ash. However, the Thousand Sons commander was unmovable, informing the word bearers that his battleship was to be boarded by the loyalists. So Hotep's response was, "Fuck you, buddy. I'm sending my Spire Guard over."
It's important to note that the Thousand Sons are good people. They do not fall to chaos lightly. It takes they are loyalists. They very much believe in the Imperial cause, and it is not until they are turned into basically, empty suits of nothing with dust inside them and are basically robots that, like, after getting screwed over by the Space Wolves a bunch of times.
And the Waning Moon and Hotep this is after that fall happened, but he was way off in a different part of the galaxy with a different battle group. So he wasn't connected. He has no idea what happened on Prospero.
Yeah. So like not being subject to the Space Wolf invasion and not feeling the sting of that betrayal as they sort of like view it, like to them, anyone else who's in the Thousand Sons out, it's just another day, right? We're just, raking up muck for the Emperor.
And remember, it was Magnus making the decision at the last minute when he had like 100 sons left alive on Prospero, as Prospero is literally disintegrating around him. Leman Russ has broken his back. Magnus is laying dying. Magnus is, with his dying moments, realizing that the pyramid he's on Prospero is all that's left of his entire legion, at least that's there on the planet. That's when he makes the deal. And it's those 100 or so guys at the very beginning that's all subjected to it. The Thousand Sons that are on foreign battlefields that haven't attempted to return yet, none of that stuff has happened to them yet.
And it's an act of desperation, legion. Right?
Yeah. But as soon as it happened, and as soon as Tzeentch unveiled, I've been doing this too forever, Magnus is like, you know what? Can't hate a playa, which is one of those like, okay, come on. So you were gonna fall. Magnus did nothing wrong.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
Yeah, I am a Thousand Sons.
Feelings 100% valid.
Magnus apologist all the way. Like,
and Erebus is the best and the fluffiest. Everybody should give Erebus kisses and hugs. Erebus is like the most hated character. It's kind of fun.
He is. I mean, like, if we want to say what is 0.0 for most of this stuff, he is like.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, Erebus is the architect of the heresy.
Erebus and Logar.
Yeah.
Although, so Erebus is like figuring out how to make the heresy happen, while Logar is off writing the Bible. Is essentially what happened. Like, if you want to look at it that way, like Logar's Bible.
Right.
Logar is off communing with the dark gods and writing the words of Logar, which grew out of the Levitico Divinitas. That was the name of the book that Logar wrote, which became the foundation of the ecclesiarchy. So the faith of modern 40k is actually based on stuff that Logar wrote about the Emperor before Logar fell to chaos.
And this is why I say it should be the Logar heresy, because he was specifically starting. It was a religion thing. He was writing the book. He was doing the whole thing, and he was literally the one. I mean, he's the one that's committing the heresy.
Because Erebus steals the anatheme, and then the anatheme is used to. Erebus steals the anatheme from the Atrixans, from the Interrex, to start a war between the Interrex and the Sons of Horus, specifically so the anatheme can be used to stab Horus. So Horus is put into a position where he has to bargain with the dark gods to survive. Right? It's all a big giant plot.
Of course, my head canon is that Horus did not bargain with the Chaos Gods. Horus died, and something else came back.
Well, that's what Gavril Loken believed, and that's why when everything came down and the bolts came loose, those Sons of Horus became the Luna Wolves again, because Loken was like, "There's nothing of my Primarch left. My Primarch is dead." Like, even Abaddon towards the end of the Siege of Terra was like, "Who the fuck is this thing that I'm following?" Anyway,
it's really interesting that a lot of the story beats that we're talking about here and the sort of the granularity, most of this is a modern innovation, right? Like the stuff that we're talking about, like the emperor being essentially an atheist, and all the stuff about like Lorgar being kind of a dude who's into way too much weird rituals and stuff. That was always a thing, but that central conflict of Lorgar being like, I really want to have my special dad religion, and then dad saying, I'm not into that, and then him getting upset and going, well, fine, I'm going to worship Satan instead, and like painting his fingernails black and like, putting on a cool like black t-shirt. Like that.
It's all like 4th, 5th edition. Yeah.
That's the last like 10 years, up
20,
until this.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, well, I'm so old.
Just think about your knee right now. It add 10 years. No.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, sometimes, I wonder, and I don't know about Drew, you might know a little bit better than any of us on some of the backstories, but I know the writers have to get okayed, that GW has to okay it, but how much of it do you think is completely planned out, or if there is a sort of a roadmap or even not a roadmap, and an author goes, this would be really cool, can I write this? And they're like, oh yeah, that would be cool, and all of a sudden the lore has expanded in these places. A lot of it some of it feels very planned, and some of it doesn't feel very planned.
From what I understand,
why?
Maybe you'll. Yeah,
I can tell you right now, because none of it is.
Yeah,
absolutely none of it is.
That's what I thought.
Like, up until, especially like up until a certain point, very little of it was. I mean,
it was about book 15 when Dan Abnett and Gav Thorpe apparently sat down and said, we need to stop. Everybody needs to stop. We need a full roadmap, and now we need to execute. And because it may have been a little bit after that, but because of that, when that split happened, that was when all of those threads got closed, and those loops got woven back into the story. There were like 4 authors: Dan Abnett, Gav Thorpe, and 2 others that were I should know their names off the top of my head, but I don't. Who G-Dub essentially trusted implicitly to take the Codex lore. The art book, the Horus Heresy art book existed before the books had started to be written. It's sitting over there on my shelf. Publication date predates the first Horus Heresy book. So there was artwork who had been done by Blanche and Goodwin and a bunch of other people that kind of chronicled all this stuff. And G-Dub trusted these 4 authors to essentially run with the horse and keep it on track. But what ended up happening was the books started doing really, really well. And because they were doing really, really well, they brought in other authors. And then there was this like 3-year publishing period where there were no fucking rules. And then at that point, Abnett and Thorpe were like, we need to, no, everybody stop. We're all meeting in a room. We're planning out, we're going to go through the art book. We're going to talk to Goodwin. We're going to talk to Blanche. We're going to talk to all of the people and figure out what they were doing with the art. We're going to set all of these major plot points in place, and then we're going to fill in everything. And while we're doing that, we're going to take the mess that was created and we're going to fix it.
Well, I mean, they had the mess goes all the way back to 1988, essentially, when they said the Horus Heresy was a thing, right? Like to justify why there were only Space Marines in the Space Marine box, right?
Right.
And it has been a cobbled together patchwork mess up until that point, and then they started formalizing it, as you said, without a definitive plan.
Yeah.
Right. All they had were the Bibles to go off of. The Bibles were basically just like they were these essentially
they're art books. Essentially,
they're design guides. Right. Yeah. They're literally like, these Space Marines have these kinds of shoulder pads that look this way, and they have this kind of trim and this kind of color, and Necron stuff is like, basic geometry and so on, right?
And like this is it. It's literally the Horus Heresy book. The thing that all this came out of is a collection of art pieces from Epic and from White Dwarf after the release of the first and so it's anyway.
Ryan and I talked about this in one of our Origins of 40k sort of thing, where it really started. Rogue Trader there was a civil war, basically there was some sort of conflict. They didn't really talk much about it. And then it all came out basically at the same time. Titan Legions was really the first where they came out with, they expanded on that conflict a little bit in the fluff of Titan Legions.
Is it Adeptus Titanicus, and then
Adeptus Titanicus, not Titan Legions.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Space Marine, you only had Space Marines, so they had to say why they were only Space Marines, why they were fighting each other. And at the same time that Space Marine came out, and by Space Marine, we are talking about the epic scale game Space Marine. And by the way, for our listeners, for the epic scale Titan Legions, the old epic scale Titan Legions. And at the same time, they came out with, they mentioned it in one of the 40k books, and it all came out at about the same, like January and December of that year.
It goes basically, Space Marine, which was the spinoff of Adeptus Titanicus in 1988. Right. Later in 1988, we get the first, it's Slaves to Darkness, where they start formalizing it.
Yeah, so we get Slaves to Darkness. Actually, Slaves to Darkness was published first, and then Space Marines by 2 months.
Right.
I looked up the publication dates on that. But when we had this conversation before, it was like one was January and one was February or something.
Yeah,
like that.
one was end of fourth quarter December, and one was beginning of first quarter January.
That's what it was. So they were basically written at the same time.
Yeah. And publishing, and we talked about this a couple of times. Publishing deals in a cycle of it's usually being published, or it's usually started about 3 or 4 years before it's published. So, when the heresy itself started going off the rails, in, I don't know what you want to say, maybe like 2012 or so. It's really in those, there's a really good solid core of like 4 or 5 books that you can read back to back that all lead into each other. They're by different authors. And then everything starts going a little wiggity. And there's some really good standout books in the It All Goes Wiggity. The Schism of Mars stuff, as an example, is all fucking fantastic. And it's in the wiggity section. But it was at that point that, Dan Abnett and whatever, I don't know why it doesn't necessarily matter who the authors were, but that core of authors was essentially brought to the table, and that core of authors sat down and said, okay, we have to stop doing what you're saying, using the visual Bible to just sort of do stuff, and we need to stick to a concise story. And they pretty well stuck to the story, at least as far as what we were given in second edition. And remember, in first edition Rogue Trader, the Emperor is a really old dude who's still very much alive. And the Golden Throne is like legitimately just a throne. It wasn't until second edition that the idea that he was essentially ever presently dead and the Horus Heresy was introduced. And it wasn't until third edition that we really got the definitive image of what we think of as the Golden Throne now. And in fact, John Blanche, when he was talked about that really famous painting, the painting that's in everybody's head as to what the Golden Throne looks like, John Blanche even said that's more a representation of what's shown to the people of the Imperium to scare them into compliance. It doesn't necessarily reflect the actual Golden Throne. So John
that
Blanche
makes a ton of sense, actually.
Did artwork in universe as propaganda. And that's the image, the text-to-speech emperor image, essentially, is not necessarily even what it might look like. We don't know what it might look like. It could literally be like a gold coffin sitting in a room. It is,
and what we would see, even if that is what it is, that's just the tip. The Golden Throne is not a chair.
Yeah, it's a
machine that
artifact.
Goes all the way down, like through what was the Himalayas. I know it's now a flat plane, but it's huge. It goes down thousands of layers in the Imperial Palace.
It is essentially like Mount Everest hollowed out and covered in gold. It's a massive machine. Yeah, like impossibly large.
Anyway, to get back to the Furious Abyss, it was at the moment where Hotep told Zandakil, fuck you, we're boarding, that Zandakil had his answer as to whether or not Magnus's boy was going to fall in line with the rest of the Legion. At this point, he ordered the Furious Abyss to fire a spread of torpedoes directly at the waning moon. And the waning moon during all of this had slowly positioned itself before the massive warship's prow, which was sort of a common thing. You know, warships face each other when they're friendly and they're talking to each other. And that's what the waning moon thought was happening. Meanwhile, the enormous ship's starboard laser batteries, so as it's firing torpedoes into the waning moon's face, its starboard batteries open up, and the beams of crimson light stab out across the void and tear the frigate Fearless apart in a bright and silent fury. The giant battleship massacred Cestus's fleet as the battle continued to unfold, and the loyalist ships Fearless and Waning Moon were soon joined by the Ferox, the Ferocious, and the Boundless, which were all left as floating carcasses left to the void. The battle shook Cestus to his core. The word-bearers turned on their own. He had just witnessed the birth of war among the sworn brotherhood of the Astartes. Once, he would have admonished his brothers for voicing mild dissent against a fellow legionary, but now he wondered how far such treachery truly went. Was it confined to this single warship, or had it permeated the word-bearers' legion? Was the Mechanicum aware of the word-bearers' betrayal of the Emperor? Such a thing could not be possible, and these were the questions running through his mind like a fever. Cestus found himself having difficulty believing what had just unfolded before him. Well, that's like a really important thing to remember with all of these battles of the Horus Heresy. The Loyalists are pretty gobstopped for an unfortunately long amount of time. Like, they don't know how to react, and because they don't know how to react, they're slaughtered.
Makes sense.
It is an impossible event to all of them. I mean, they have been so thoroughly indoctrinated to live in this world where, like, the Emperor is the highest authority. Everyone answers to him. Everyone is loyal. That's just how it works. Like, and it has been this way for thousands of years. So, like,
and
why would anything change now?
For thousands more?
Yeah.
Satisfied with the destruction that they had wrought, the Furious Abyss wasted little time and dove back into the warp on its rampage towards Macragge. The word-bearers left a psionic mine in their wake within the Immaterium to disrupt the ability of any navigators to lead starships to the warp in their pursuit. Cestus and his remaining loyalist vessels wasted little time plunging into the Materium to chase down the word-bearer's vessel as best they could. Only briefly had Cestus considered returning to Terra to bring warning of the word-bearer's betrayal to the Emperor. They decided against this course of action. They were now at war with their brothers, and they had to prosecute the fight with all the strength and conviction that they could muster, bringing it against any foe of humanity. So they had to treat the word-bearers like any other foe, and they had to do so in the name of the Emperor. Cestus and his fellow Astartes captains debated their next course of action. The enemy were Astartes turned traitor, but they had no idea what that meant for the rest of the word-bearers' legion. Furthermore, the Mechanicum had built the vessel and kept its existence secret from the Imperium, suggesting some collaboration on the tech priesthood's part. Cestus believed that the word-bearers were aligned against the Ultramarines' legion and therefore, by extension, against the Emperor. And this is kind of important. Cestus was like, the word-bearers are against us.
Yeah.
Their fight is with us and with us alone. However, because they violated the Sacred Brotherhood, they're at war with the Imperium. So Cestus did not see the word-bearers as at war with the Imperium. The word-bearers must also had some supporters within the Mechanicum, for even if it was all contained to those that had worked on the Furious Abyss, the word-bearers had committed an act of war against the Imperium, which meant that something much greater had to be afoot. So he put together in his mind, at the very least, the Mechanicum who worked on this ship are also traitors. They have to be. There's no way this could have happened without their help. The Loyalist fleet agreed that the word-bearers were no longer their brothers and needed a way to disable the Furious Abyss, attacking it from whatever vulnerability they could find. The traitors would be destroyed for their treachery, but not before the Loyalists discovered how deep this conspiracy against the Imperium went. At this point, Cestus doesn't know of the War Master's betrayal and decides that Horus needs to know what new enemies might be against him. So Cestus is not seeing everything. Cestus needs to warn, in his mind, Horus just as much as he needs to warn the Emperor, which is a little coincidental. I almost said ironic, but it's not. It's just coincidental.
Well, but it makes sense. He's just setting it up the chain of command.
Exactly. He has no idea that there's treachery above him at this point.
Right.
The remaining loyalist vessels would therefore follow the furious abyss and await for their chance to strike. And it didn't take long for the Ultramarines' moment of opportunity, as the massive Wordbearer's ship had taken anchor in the Bacca system, on an orbital dock, Bacca Trivermian 14, near this planet's 14th moon. That's what we're going with.
Triumvirian.
Sure. Trivirium.
It's good enough. All right.
Makes me want to play Battlefield Gothic. I'm just...
Yeah. The evolution of the ship designs is quite interesting. From literally flying cathedrals to, I don't know, like snowplows to kind of having more of a modern sort of like sci-fi interpretation, but still having some of those like hard edges and angles and cathedral elements and stuff like that. I mean, like,
they're very not aerospace looking at all.
Yeah.
Oh, they don't have to be.
Yeah,
they literally have flying buttresses on them. You know, like they don't mess around. They're like, yeah, the book said Battlefleet Gothic, and we're going to lean into the Gothic part.
I really love
like it's literally Gothic architecture, right? This is what is inspiring a lot of this. This is a more modern interpretation. This is definitely like taking a little bit more liberties and looks more like what we'd expect a sci-fi spaceship to look like these days. You know,
I really love the fact that they've always had ramming prows, though. They've always kept that like, fuck it, just run it into the bad guy or run it into the other guy.
Which is a ship that like fires chains with claws on the end, to like grapple the other.
I don't know, but it's an orc ship.
Oh, that's fun.
I think it's a chaos ship.
Yeah.
It literally has cannons that shoot chains. Like, how long are these chains? How
the
close do these ships get?
Wayne Johnson. I don't know.
Yeah. HMS Wayne Johnson. Well, and that's the funny thing. You know, we've talked about it before. The engagement range for modern air jets is at a point where the jets don't see each other. The whole idea of dogfighting is not a thing that exists. The fact that these ships are broadsiding each other at point blank range is insane.
Well, because they don't have targeting computers.
Right. Yeah, that's true. They don't have AI to help with targeting.
No, they don't. They can't do the equivalent of over the horizon strikes. They literally have to have eyes on the other ship. By the way, it's the same thing in Star Wars. They do not use they use manual targeting.
Yeah.
And well, that's why it's so that's the explanation given to all these why you can see what's the really good sci-fi series the Expanse, where they're firing off mass projectiles, basically bullets, at things where they think the ship will be.
Yep.
Because it's doing actual orbital mechanics. Whereas in the sort of sci-fi movies where you want to either describe something visually, as in you want to build the movie in somebody's head, or you actually want to show the movie like in Star Wars or even in Star Trek and all, they have to be close enough so that you can see everything. And of course, the explanation.
It's not exciting. Yeah, you don't get visual language when you deal with like over the horizon.
Right. And the explanation is, of course, there is no abominable intelligence. There's no targeting computers. There's really none of that in 40K. They literally have to be close enough to be eyes on the other ship in order to do that, so that they're always at closing distance.
Yeah.
And it makes for much more exciting storytelling.
And the other thing is that so much of Warhammer 40K's space battles are built on naval engagements of like the Age of Sail. I mean, broadsiding being a really good... These ships broadside each other. That's 100% under the Age of Sail.
Age of Sail.
The thing that gets me about Star Wars, I can't remember if it was the first or the second one, but one of them, There's like bomber ships that are dropping bombs onto another spaceship and everybody lost their minds because there's no quote unquote gravity in space. That's not true. Every ship, especially a ship of a certain size, is going to generate a microgravity. So things are going to fall towards the ship, especially these ships that are kilometers long. That's just what happens. The second thing is that very obviously a lot of the munitions used in Star Wars and in 40k and in all these things are magnetic. They have a magnetic component to them. So the bombs aren't really being dropped by gravity. They're being propelled by magnets towards their target.
And they're also following the ballistic path of the ship that's launching them, that's dropping them away.
There's all sorts of, like, you're nitpicking. There's a lot to nitpick in the stories. Nitpick the right stuff. Like, anyway.
But that is literally the reason they have to be close enough
to see each other in a fire,
because they don't have the because all that technology was outlawed.
In this particular case, too, one of the reasons that so much of this sort of space battle stuff was happening in the Heresy is because you thought the dude next to you was on your side until he opened up. Like, there was no warning that that guy was the enemy until he starts shooting you. And then you're like, oh, I guess they're the bad guys.
And if you have the ability to be close, why do you want, if you want to hold a conversation, why do you want to be planetary
bouncing it off a planetary relay?
Well, we want to wait for the lag because they do have radio. They don't just use astropaths, right? So you know,
well, and they use line of sight laser communication, and there are
but you want to wait for the lag if you're light minutes away.
And there are cases where boarding torpedoes and stuff are launched before they're within like they're in Auspex range. They're not in visual range yet. The problem is sometimes those torpedoes, those boarding torpedoes with those like 20 Marines on them, they don't make their target. Those guys is just floating in space forever.
Just chilling.
Yep.
Yeah.
Captain Skrull and his World Eaters would lead a daring assault mission at Bacca Trivium 14, moving up the station center. The two flanks that branched out from the central avenue of the dock, channels that could be used by the Space Wolves Blood Claws led by Byron, and a second group of World Eaters that were led by the only Ultramarine with the group, Antigus, in a flanking action. So essentially, because I butchered that as I read it, there was a central avenue, and then there were these two branches that came off of the central avenue that led around. Think of any modern city's freeway system where there's a freeway that goes through the city, and then there's the business loops. One business loop usually goes east and one goes west, or one goes north, one goes south. And that's what Captain Skrull is planning on doing. He's going to charge his guys straight up the center, and he's going to send the other guys out and around to come back on the Furious Abyss as it's docked. So this is a covert action being done towards the docked ship. It's a classic feint and strike strategy that aimed to get all of these Space Marines close enough to breach and get aboard the starship without there being an open fight. They didn't want to have a gun battle. They wanted to sneak aboard, essentially, or as covert, as sneaky as Space Marines can be.
Ryan, I don't want to be that guy. Are you ready for this one?
Yep.
Ultramarine Antiges.
Antiguus? I liked Antiguus, but you're right, it's Antiguus.
Yeah.
Antiguus sounds better. Can we go with Antiguus? Can we just rename him Antiguus?
We'll throw a U in there. We're good.
I need everybody to be that guy. Apparently, sometimes. The assault boats had managed to dock quickly and without incident. So the assault boats come out of Captain Cestus's They come out of Captain Siestas's Cestus's ad hoc fleet. They manage to get to Bacca Trivium 14. They all get off. They all get on. However, as they begin to approach their target, the Sons of Angron are finding it increasingly difficult to keep their berserk fury in check. While the orders of the Ultramarine Antiges had forbidden it, Skrull encouraged his warriors to kill any they met as they converged closer and closer to their target. His only directive was to leave none alive to tell or warn others of their approach, a duty the World Eaters were pursuing with brutal efficiency. They left a string of bodies in a bloody wake, mostly of innocent dockworkers and menial corpses, that led from their advance back to their assault boats. And this reckless savagery didn't pass unnoticed by the word bearers, as they became aware that the general mood on Bacca Trivium 14 was not good anymore. An ambush then followed, with the loyalists being quickly overwhelmed and slaughtered by the word bearers. Beinregar witnessing Skrull and Antiges advancing toward the furious abyss with only a small combat squad of surviving world eaters, who were scattering crew from the battleship as they moved forward. The world eater's captain, 3 of his battle brothers, and the Ultramarine were the only that were able to get aboard the warship through one of its belly embarkation ports. So they don't even go in through the big open doorway they're trying to get in through. They get into like a tiny little embarkation portal, essentially. You know, they want to go in through the big open door so no one notices, and then they have to fight their way through a small door so everybody notices. Mm-hmm. The Loyalists then moved deeper into the ship, their advance only being challenged after a while when onboard naval armsmen were able to call word bearers astartes to catch up with them, and another fight happens. Skrull alone survives this second disastrous attack and managed to stow away aboard the Furious Abyss, avoiding any attempt to capture or kill him. There then became a cat and mouse game which lasted for several weeks, even as the baleful words of the traitor Zandikil piped through the ships in an attempt to corrupt the World Eater. So not only are the word bearers hunting Skrull for like 3 or 4 weeks, but the entire time Zandikil is essentially like propagandaing him, like, hey, you know, you want to be on our side. Hey, we'll let you slaughter as many of the ultra weenies as you want.
I just like that 3 of these guys got onto a ship with 1,000 word bearers, the largest battleship that's ever been produced by Terra, and they're like, "We got this."
Yeah. it's 5 of them get on, but yeah, exactly.
It's just like the A-team. We'll get Face here. He'll go woo some word bearers. You know, he'll go seduce them, while B.A. Baracus gets behind the controls and crashes it into the planet. And they just they love it when a plan comes together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But during all of this, Cestus and his remaining loyalist fleet hid behind the bulk of Bacca Trivium, tracking the wordbearer's vessel as it headed for the Mandeville Point warp jump vector that would lead them to Macragge. We've talked about the Mandeville points before. Mandeville points are essentially places in Imperial space that they 100% know always go to another area specifically, and it's always at a trackable timeline. So a Mandeville warp point might go from, let's say, Saturn to Bernard's star, and it might take a day. And they just know they can always use that pathway. It will always take the same amount of time. And if there's a Mandeville point that goes one way, there's essentially a Mandeville point that goes another way. Now, a Mandeville point is different from a warp gate, and there is a couple of warp gates. And I say a couple because there's really only a couple. One of them is in the Jericho Reach system, all the way up to the galactic northeast. A warp gate connects 2 points on the map instantaneously. So if there's a warp gate in the galactic southwest, as far on the spiral as you can get, and there's one in the Jericho Reach, you can literally go from one side of the galaxy to the other instantaneously with your entire fleet. So Mandeville points are stable warp areas. Warp gates are giant machines that allow instantaneous travel.
Very big Stargate.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cestus finally had discovered the truth of the wordbearer's plan to assault the Ultramarines' homeworld. Once in the Macragge system, the Furious Abyss intended to attack Formoska, which was a dead moon, since a direct assault against Macragge would be a suicide. However, the debris from Formoska's destruction would strike Macragge, achieving their ends just as well. They assumed this would force the Ultramarines Legion to divert forces from the muster point on Calth to aid at Macragge. So essentially, a bunch of people from Calth would now be in transit from one battle to the other, making the battle at Calth easier for the word bearers there, and making the final battle at Macragge easier for the word bearers there. Split your enemy, essentially. Split the party. Forces that would become caught up in the subsequent asteroid storm of the moon's demise as they translated into Macragg's system from the warp. The word bearers would then be able to strike the Ultramarines' fleet as it was divided and damaged by the asteroids, allowing the traders to take them by surprise. The assault would not destroy Macragge outright, but it would kill tens of millions of innocent civilians and eradicate a good portion of the Ultramarines' strength. The Furious Abyss could then use the debris like a shield, allowing it to get past the warning stations and satellites around the planet to unleash a viral payload on the world's inhabitants. The Juggernaut vessel was powerful enough to weather the inevitable firestorm of Macragg's defensive lasers. We talked about at the beginning. The Furious Abyss was designed, essentially, to weather defense lasers like this. The death toll from the viral strike would be total, wiping out the population of the Ultramarines' homeworld, the crown jewel of the realm of Ultramar. This attack would divide Reboot Guilliman and his Ultramarines Legion, destroying those at Macragge, even as Corferon continued to destroy those that he fought on Calth. Cestus knew the Furious Abyss had to be stopped at all costs to prevent the total destruction of his Legion and its homeworld. The Wrathful limped from the warp behind the Wordbearer's vessel, immediately coming to battle stations. Beams of azure light lit up against the ship's flanks as the blazing fury of her lances were unleashed, explosions rippling down the armored flanks of her target, the Furious Abyss, together with blast flares of the void shields that were being impacted. This is a Hail Mary attack.
This is diabolical. Like at this point, we are full on mustache twirling villain stuff. Like,
oh yeah, as soon as he figures out the full plan, and that's what happens. You know, they've got enough information from essentially the word bearers that they captured / killed on the Vaca Trivium 14 station, that they're able to kind of piece everything together little by little and figure out what's going to happen. And it's just, okay, well, shit, we don't have a choice anymore. We have to stop these guys. It's do or die.
I mean, especially the revelation that they are going to virus bomb and exterminatus the planet, right? They are going to kill every living thing there. You know, that's horrific.
And that hasn't, as far as Cestus and the Ultramarines that are with him at this point, or the Marine Stardust in general that are with him at this point, understand. Because remember, it's not really that many Ultramarines. There were 10 to begin with. We know one died. So at the best case scenario, there's 9, and there's probably more like 3. And then there's whoever survived of the World Eaters that didn't get onto the ship, and whoever survived of the Blood Claws that are under Byragon. So there's probably like 6 Space Marines left or whatever. None of them know that Istvan 3 has been virus bombed. None of them know of what has already happened. None of them even know that Calth is currently being assaulted, because the battle at Calth at this point has started. They just don't know it yet. They find out, oh, there is going to be a battle at Calth. Oh, they want to do all this stuff. So the Furious Abyss is late to getting to Macragge, 1. 2, no one knows what's happening at Calth, because these guys have all been in the warp, traveling between one point and another.
It's that broken telephone. I mean, it feels like this is a kind of a tactical retelling a little bit of some of like the World War II, like the revelation of the Blitzkrieg, right? Like how effective, it turns out if you don't walk up and say, we are starting war now. Everyone get in your war lines. You there on the other side, get in your war line. We're going to neatly march towards one another. Like, this is dirty stuff. Like, we are bombing you in your sleep. You know, like we are attacking you with our giant, massive warship that is designed specifically to defeat, you know, imperial planetary defenses, so that we can just enact genocides to break the psyche of these people. Right?
Yeah, and even if they don't kill all the Ultramarines, this would completely destroy the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines, if this succeeds, the Ultramarine Legion is dead.
Yeah, right. Like, as you said, this is the crown jewel of
Ultramar,
of Ultramar, right? Like it is the most important thing from like a morale perspective more than anything, right?
And it's going to become a super important thing as the heresy continues and the Imperium Secundus is founded.
Right.
But these attacks coming from the Wrathful towards the Furious Abyss were mere bee stings to the beast as massive as the Abyss class battleship, and the Wordbearer's vessel responded with a devastating salvo all its own. As the crimson rays of the Furious Abyss broadside cannons bloomed, the Wrathful was already moving, trying to bring the enemy vessel's prow abeam of its lasers. Really, really common. You never want to be in the broadside. You always want to be presenting your broadside to your enemy's nose. Really, really big thing in naval war. That's exactly what they're doing here in space battle. The shields of the Loyalist warship disintegrated under the traitor battleship's assault, and the aft decks were raked by deadly fire. Explosive impacts erupted into fonts of debris, spilling Loyalist crew into the freezing black void. Still, the Wrathful endured, its last-ditch maneuver bringing it away from the deadly barrage. With Cestus leading the assault, boarding torpedoes soared from the Loyalist vessel's prow, followed by a second volley from its lances, and the Loyalist ship held together despite the brutal barrage it sustained from the traitor vessel, which allowed the Loyalist boarding torpedoes to reach their target. The Wrathful stays alive long enough to make sure that those boarding torpedoes get where they're going. The Furious Abyss turned its full armament against the Loyalist aggressor, even with the damage sustained by the Wrathful having slowed it. The Loyalist vessel stubbornly stood its ground, making a defiant last stand. Lances flashed as it poured everything it had at the Wordbearer's battleship. But it wasn't enough as the Furious Abyss turned and unleashed hell on its broadside. Even as the Loyalist ship died, Cestus and Bayragar linked up with Skrull deep within the bowels of the traitor battleship. The desperate boarding action that followed cut a bloody path to the vessel's plasma genitorium. Once there, Bayragar and Skrull sabotaged the plasma reactors, beginning a chain reaction that would consume the massive starship. So the entire reason the Wrathful continues to fire is, one, as Chac said, they've got to keep that laser on the target so those torpedoes reach their mark, because it's all based on line of sight. And two, as long as the Wrathful is firing, the Abyss isn't paying attention to torpedoes, schmorpedoes, we'll slug them off. So they're not paying attention to the fact that those torpedoes have life signs on them. Those torpedoes hit Bayragar and Cestus. Get it? He's a DJ now. DJ Cestus. Get onto the ship. They're able to find Skrull, and they're able to essentially get the actual plan in and realize this is not a ship tearing a ship apart. They have to sabotage the ship's plasma reactors to bring the ship down from the inside. That's the plan.
Wow.
The plan is not
this is
shoot
pod
it.
racing.
Yeah, that's pod racing. No, this is pod racing.
And by all accounts, it is. They're way outnumbered even when they get there, right?
It's a massive bloody battle. But again, most of the word bearers are up on the gun decks. Most of the word bearers are on the bridge. The word bearers very specifically, and this kind of gets into like Legion culture in a lot of ways. The word bearers left menial work to menials. Yeah. So running the engineering deck.
Coal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they got servitors and things like that down there doing that stuff.
Did you ever see the Fry Bender what's the show? The Futurama show where they're on the space Titanic and they're down in the bowels with guys shoveling coals into the first. That's actually what these spaceships are like. They talk about, changing the fuel cells in the in these spaceships, and you only change them once because, they have to change them all the time. You only change them once because you die from the radiation coming out of the plasma furnaces. You're not going to have space Marines doing that. They have,
You're going to have menials.
Even though the Space Marines would be able to survive it and not die, it's just not their job. And the other thing that's happening here, and the other thing to point out here is, you've got Bayragar, you've got Cestus, and you've got probably like one or two other Marines with them. that all make the ship and link up with Skrull relatively quickly because Skrull's probably anticipating them. They probably were able to communicate with him somehow. At that point, you've got essentially 3 named heroes, 3 captains of the Space Marines marching through naval armsmen.
Yeah.
They are just shredding these Imperial Navy guys because these Imperial Navy guys don't have anything to put up a fight against them at all.
What, like las pistols at best?
Yeah, maybe las rifles, maybe auto guns and shotguns, but not anything that's going to take down a Space Marine. And that's just the power of a Space Marine. Unless what?
Unless the plot demands it, right? and then a guardsman or a naval armsman could take down a Space Marine with one lucky shot of his las pistol.
Exactly.
I mean, like if you've seen the modern Navy, right? Like the sailors do not walk around in a boat with a rifle on their backs 24/7, right? Like you have to get to the
your station.
You have to get to up. You have to go to the armory, collect your weapon. So like again,
and then react,
and at this point you have like 8 foot tall super soldiers with chain swords just cutting through these guys like butter.
If you were lucky enough to see the Astartes short that was on YouTube, or if you have Warhammer Plus and you've seen the Astartes short now on Warhammer Plus, that's what these guys are doing. I mean, they're shredding through these Imperial Guardsmen. Mm-hmm. And they're dying, they're getting hurt, they're losing one guy here, one guy there. But you start off with 5, you're probably going to make the Plasma Genitorium, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
As the Great Dreadnought began to shake and explode around them, Cestus confronted the Wordbearer's fleet captain Zandikel in his attempt to flee. So he doesn't find Zandikel like in the bridge. Dude's running.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah,
like I'm out.
Cestus manages to kill the Wordbearer, but sustains mortal wounds in the confrontation himself. With the ship dying around him, its fires greedily consuming the traitor's plan to cripple the Ultramarines and destroy Macragge, Cestus took solace in his final moments. He thought of Macragge and its glory. His duty done, he was content as the sweet release of death overcame him. The massive explosion of the furious abyss served as his funeral pyre, even as the ruined storm rippled across the galaxy, bringing darker tidings to the realms of Ultramar. And with the doom of the furious abyss, we wrap up part 1 of the Horus Heresy, War Never Changes.
I think the point that's really important in this, that you've made multiple times, but we should say it again, is that how this was all a story of mixed, what would become traitor and loyalist legionnaires, or their legions become, they are all loyalists.
Everyone legions. Everyone chasing the furious abyss in this is a loyalist. Yeah,
is a loyalist, but they come from some legions that remained loyal and some legions that turned traitor. Mm-hmm. At this point, they're all loyalists, but at the beginning, they're not all loyalists.
And of course, from a gameplay perspective, like this is by design.
I mean, they're loyalists, but because you had the Angron's boys and you had Magnus
and 1000 Sun. Right. But as we said, like this is a conceit that they generate. To step a little bit outside the lore, right? So that you can justify why do I have loyalist Death Guard fighting traitor Luna Wolves? Like it doesn't make any sense from these guys are on one side and these guys are on the other side, right? Like I think it's very clever of them to build this meta narrative around this gameplay conceit, and it makes for more interesting storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Like, imagine how mortified Mahotep would be, like, when he turns around and finds out exactly what happened on Prospero, and to see
and
it
he's been hanging out with the Space Wolves there.
Yeah.
On whatever moon that was.
Mm-hmm. Like, everything's fine. I've been drinking with my Space Wolf buddies. Space Wolves,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It is it's interesting that like it's very the whole like, and then 3 mighty heroes snuck on board the very giant warship. It's very Star Warsy, right? It's very totally like is. On the Death Star, Yeah.
Well, and we don't know, obviously Hotep's ship had a bunch of Prosperian Spire Guard on it, and we know that a lot of the resources that Cestus brought to himself were part of the Saturnine naval elements under Rear Admiral Kaminska. So there's definitely Luna Auxilia and Sola Auxilia soldiers that are probably all over this. Like, we took a book, we took parts of a couple of books, and we're distilling them down into what the important beats of are for the continuing narrative. When you actually read the books, these battles are a lot more ferocious. There's a lot more people involved in them. But we're not trying to give you an 8-hour audiobook on the Furious Abyss. We're trying to sum up the Furious Abyss in a podcast episode. So if this sort of stuff is igniting interest in anybody listening, like there are books that get way deeper into this. Definitely encourage you to check them out. Some of the Dan Abnett is obviously one of our favorite authors. We bring him up a lot. Gav Thorpe is also a very, very gifted author. There's a lot of other. We'll probably talk about him when we get to the when we get back to the Under the Realms of Madness side and talk about fantasy stuff. But there's a lot of gifted fantasy authors. There's a lot of good authors that are writing for Black Library. So if this inspires you, check it out.
If anything, it's a shame how they fail to distribute these stories outside of sort of the hobby realm. Black Library is a very sort of inside thing, and
it's really hard to find them. Like, they don't really have a section at my local library. If I want to check out a book, it has to be interlibrary loan, and they're just very dispersed. Get those kids reading.
There was a time where you literally could not buy Black Library, like Games Workshop publications, anywhere else but the store. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
When Horus Heresy started coming out, I started to see the books in books when I still went to bookstores and then just do everything digital. But I started to see them in bookstores, and I actually read some of them in paper, and then at that point I'm like, Horus. I think I read like the first couple of books. I'm like, this doesn't really interest me.
A lot of it turns into bolter porn.
Yeah.
There is some really cool story beats in a lot of these. There is, if something we cover strikes your fancy, I would definitely go look up the story. And realistically, like we talked about the Furious Abyss, Google the Furious Abyss, and you'll find a lot of the resources that we gather. I used to list off the resources that I touched on when we did these episodes, but it really becomes a 10th edition core book. It's the same like 7 books.
Yeah. I mean, I have read some good ones that aren't bolter porn recently. I read the what is it, Dorn the Protector of Terror or whatever. That one actually had very little of that. It did at the end, but that was really an Alpha Legion book, even though it was
the lead up to the Siege of Terra stuff gets really, really deep into the mindsets of the Primarchs and the mindsets of the soldiers, which is really cool. And a lot of it also focuses on the human soldiers that are in these battles, which is really, really cool. They do, there are still a battle in it because it's still a military science fiction book. But yeah, it's not when I say bolter porn, I literally mean like brother.
Yeah, no.
Brother.
Hot Space Marine on Space Marine action.
It just, Hot Space Marine.
They're all boys.
I mean, I read the first Custodes book, and that was from the leading up to the assault on Terra, and that one was good too. But that's not all boys on boys action anymore. So, well, at least the books as written still are.
My favorite stories still, like perspective wise, in terms of, they are always from the perspective of not a superhuman, genetically engineered super thing, or the world's greatest inquisitor who can do everything and seduce every being, and can karate chop a dude into space. Like, it's my favorite series still to this day are the Gaunt's Ghost books. Like, I think those do a really good job of having ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances and seeing like the drama that comes from that.
For some reason, I could never get into them. I have to give them a try again. I know they're really good.
I really like them, but like, to be fair, I have not read anything new in many years. So
yeah, a lot of the Penitent, the Beckwin series, which is the third Inquisitor series, is really, really good.
Well, I
it's
like
got a very Charles Dickens bend to it.
I like the whole Eisenhorn Ravener, because they aren't superhuman Inquisitors that can do no wrong. They get a lot of harm done to them, and it's very they are not like Inquisitor drops down, solves all the problems, walks away with the girl. They don't work that way. They are anti-heroes that don't win. Well, I assume that at least somebody's going to win in the last book that we're still waiting on, but you're 9 books deep and nobody's won yet, really.
The original Eisenhorn trilogy and the original Gaunt's Ghost trilogy were like required reading for like all staff. It was sort of generally understood that that's where most of the present lore at the time when I was working for the store in 2002 was sort of like, that was the gold standard, you know? And I feel like they've been chasing after that for a long time. They was essentially handed the keys to Dan Abnett at this point, right? Like, he has done the vast majority of the fiction writing in this universe with like a handful of people on the periphery handling some of the other books and like these one-offs like Silver Skulls and stuff like that, you know. But in terms of like these big soaring epics, it's been Dan for like 20 years. So
and there's stuff that exists in lore. There's stuff that exists in lore to a point where it has model representation, like Vox casters, that comes out of Dan Abnett stories. Right. Dan Abnett is the person who came up with the Vox caster, like that. And now you can buy Imperial Guard, and it's there in the box. You can glue it on your dude's back. That came out of Gaunt's Ghosts. The concept of a Vox caster that was being carried by an Imperial Guard soldier is from Gaunt's Ghosts.
I'm waiting for EO stick packs that you can like glue onto their helmets.
There you go. Like it. Hey guys, if you have any questions about this specific episode, or if you have questions about the show or any of us as hosts, one of the ways that you can reach us is through email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Discord and join the conversation about existing lore, world building, gaming in general, and much more. You can also find the show on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and check out our website, underthehiveofmadness.com. Check out our link tree to find all sorts of links to keep up with everyone in the cast hobby progress and internet meanderings. Links and spellings are in the show notes.
Help the podcast grow by liking and reviewing us wherever you get your podcast fix. Our home is Spotify, but you can find us on Audible, Apple Podcast, CastBox, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, and more. Support us through Patreon at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. And join awesome people like the Baramex, Semi-Serious Nerd, and Big Mullins for access to extra content and a chance to snag some cool merch in our monthly giveaway.
The Bolter Brain, home of Devil's Comet Amsec, made from only the finest of comet ice. Need something for use on the battlefields of the Underhive? Pick up a Warmonger's shield generator and receive a Bolter slug of Gringar's Rotgut Rail on the house. We are the vagrant rebels of the Pirate Vox frequencies, 665.66 UHMA Chemrat Radio, reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and Sump Ghoulies to keep those dials fixed right here. Same ratty frequency for a dose of the same ratty-ass attitude.
Pocket full of thrones to appease old restless bones. A razor snick, a razor stack, they flay the wicked's back. The emperor sent his sons to quiet those restless guns. A razor snick, a razor snack, they flay the pious back. The red eyes gleamed at night, always set in threes of fright. A razor snick, a razor snack, they flay the nobles back. Gleaming teeth like needles, usher us near to steeples. A razor snick, a razor snack, they flay the innocents back.
Man, these kids, they're getting real.
Next thing me just like have nursery rhymes about like I don't know, plagues and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the Ring Around a Rosie is about the plagues, so we've got our own version, which is about the four-armed emperors killing you.
You know, with the
the kids think it's super normal.
It reminds me of the original glass slipper story with was it Cinderella? Where the stepsisters cut off their toes to fit them into the glass slipper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad they took that part out of the Disney version.
It's in the ride.
It is in the ride. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Bye, all. Don't loot the corpses.
Good night, everybody.
Don't loot the corpses.
Oh, it's not night where you are.
We don't know if it's night.
Whatever it is.
Where I am.
Good, whatever it is where you are.
All right.